Shalom, ladies, and welcome. We're so glad you're here today. Charlie
Yes.
is out today. She is having some oral surgery done, and so we need to pray for her. It's going to be quite the process. It did not sound fun at all when she told me about it. Ugh.
Mm.
So be sure to lift her in your prayers. And I think she did this on purpose, Rebecca, so she didn't have to say Bechukotai. I just think that.
I would tend to agree
I mean,
because then she gets to skip out on saying it's my favorite portion, so she doesn't have to say it.
exactly. Exactly. She had a rough time with it Wednesday. So,
There you go.
yeah. Well, ladies, I just want to give you a couple of reminders about some things that are in the cafe. If you're interested, you can get your first month for half off right now. And we have got so much, we have thousands of hours of teaching in the cafe, and there is some stuff that you don't want to miss out on. There's really good stuff. As a matter of fact, I would definitely would recommend that you go listen to the half Torah on Behar and Bechukotai that
There you
Gail
go.
did. Oh, so good. It was so good. It really like ministered to my heart. So I was really glad to be able to listen to it and just enjoy Gail's insight. Oh, my word. Do you get to read her Parsha points and
I have her book staring at me right
oh,
here that I have to dig into, and I'm hoping that I get a chance this weekend because it's been sitting there like screaming at me. But yeah, I look forward to it. It's really nice to be able to get different perspectives, and it's always so beautiful. Everybody has a different perspective. Like it's like a ball, and everybody's looking at it from their side. And so you get these little nuggets that kind of just spark off in your brain and make you think about this and start making connections and everything. So whenever you have the opportunity to hear things like that, it's like it's so enriching. So that's why the cafe is so cool because you get to sit there and you get to rewind if you have to. You get to sit with the word. I'm a big proponent of just sitting with it and letting it just kind of wash over you and kind of, clear out your head and kind of get your mind into what God is focusing, you know, at that moment in your life. It could be different for you than it is for me. And that is what's so great about the living word.
isn't it? Oh, it's so
Yeah,
beautiful. I can't tell you how long it has taken me to watch certain videos to where I get to this point and then I'm like, "Oh, wait, I got to pause that." And I will sit on it for a couple of days just pondering
mm-hmm.
and taking it in and chewing on it and what are you speaking to me about this? What are you trying to tell me?
Yeah,
So yeah, it's
yeah,
such
definitely.
good stuff. So you're missing out. You're missing out if you
Take
haven't.
advantage.
Yeah, if you haven't checked it out, you should definitely do that. And there's all the if you sign up, there's all the past conferences that we've done, and everybody in there is so diverse. There are so many women in there from different places and different ideas, and it is a I see it as a very well rounded group of people, and it is a huge blessing to be a part of this. So, the portion part is, I don't know, it's kind of the fun part because we get to just kind of throw stuff out there. And so I like that a lot too. But the cafe just lets you go a little deeper. So
Yeah,
that's really
yeah,
nice. Really
yeah,
nice.
definitely. Definitely.
So I think if you're ready, that we can go ahead and just kind of dive in and we'll talk about Behar and Bechukotai.
Yes.
This is a very short portion.
It
I was
is. It
really
is.
surprised when I went to read it. I was like, that's it? It's a double portion and it's very short.
I know, you would think. But
But they're
there's some couple of little nuggets that are really, really interesting that we're gonna kind of dig into. So I'm looking forward to it.
oh, me too.
Definitely.
Me too. It's just like it's a lot of times when we talk about blessing and curses, we talk about Deuteronomy 28 more often than not. And
Yeah.
then this parsha has some blessings and curses in it that are very specific to the land and
Yes.
very detailed,
Mm-hmm.
right? I couldn't believe all
Yes.
the minute things that were important to be included in this portion. It was very I don't know, there were just some pieces that I picked up that I was like, well, that things that make you go, why this? Let's just look at one. Let's see. I have it marked, but I'm trying to remember what verse it was in. Oh, it's because I turned the page. So in chapter 25, he's talking about the Shabbat of the land and the Jubilee and how all that
Yes.
works, right? So there's a lot of detail, there's a lot of instructions about do this, and do this. This is how it's going to be handled. We go on further in the portion when we get into Bechukotai, where it's talking about how to handle those among you who have to sell their land, and there's so many details, right? Okay, so this is the one that stuck out to me first, and I'm really not sure. Like, I'm not sure. Let's chew on it and talk about it for a second. It
Okay.
starts at verse 8 in chapter 25. It says, "You are," and I'm reading from the Tree of Life,
Okay.
and it says, "You are to count off 7 Shabbatot of years, 7 years, 7 times 7 years, so that the time is 7 Shabbatot of years, 49 years. Then on the 10th day of the seventh month, on Yom Kippur, you are to sound a shofar blast. You are to sound the shofar all throughout your land." Okay, so what stuck out to me there was Yom Kippur. Why is it Yom Kippur? Because he tells us that the beginning of the year is in the spring. The
Navi,
beginning of the
yeah.
year is where we start with Passover and
Mhm.
all of that. So why Yom Kippur? I mean, we know we have we've talked about this before, having a civil calendar like our school calendar. A school
Yeah.
calendar is still a calendar. It's a calendar we follow. It has a beginning and it has an end. Well, the same thing with the Hebrew calendar. It has a beginning and it has an end. But there's also the I just lost the word I was looking for. The societal calendar. It's like the school calendar, where it's like Rosh Hashanah is the day that they call it, which is at the beginning
The head
of
of the year.
the
Yes.
head of the year,
Hmm.
right? Well, is this why? Is because they're talking about the Yovel, the Jubilee, and it's coming at Yom Kippur. That's when it's announced. That's when the trumpets are sounded, is at Yom Kippur, not at Passover.
Okay, so the point of the Jubilee is to allow for the land to rest, right? No, no,
Yes,
no. I'm sorry. The
it's the return. That's the return.
yeah.
But the
Hmm.
Shabbat year,
The Shabbat year, yeah, the
yeah,
seven, and then we have a culmination at the end, and it's kind of like where everything kind of restarts, doesn't it? Like it says, like if you sell your land during that time, it has to revert back, right? And
right,
God makes a very specific point of saying it's not even yours to sell. It's kind of like you're the steward that is supposed to be taking care of what I've given you, but it's really mine,
right.
you know. And so you can, it's almost like renting it out, and it was it this portion has a lot to do with integrity. It
Yes.
has a lot to do with integrity, because it has a lot to do with the way that you do things. There was a propensity, or there was a an ability to kind of be sneaky and kind of be not I don't know what the word is, but the weights, the measured weights, right? It had to
Adjust.
be,
Hmm.
yes, and it had, and you had the opportunity, man had the opportunity to kind of be sneaky and to kind of try to get around things to kind of do what they wanted. And so God is really specific when he's talking here, and he's saying, listen, I'm giving you all these rules and these regulations, and to be honest with you, right now we don't even know when the Jubilee year is.
Right. No clue.
That has been a point of discussion for many years. We're not going to solve that here today either.
No.
We don't have the answer,
No.
right?
Or the
When
time.
Messiah comes, he will kind of, regulate all that stuff and everything. But during these times, God is, and you're saying like it was really specific things in here that really specific. But at the same time, I think it was really specific because God is kind of pointing out to what our heart is and how we do
Yes.
things, because you had the ability, man has the ability to kind of circumvent a lot of things.
Find the
And you'll,
loopholes.
yes, totally. We are the loophole kings,
Yeah.
and so Bechukotai is kind of gonna deal a little bit more with, okay, if you do things right and you have just measures, this and this is gonna happen to you. If you kind of try to be sneaky and everything, you don't follow what I'm telling you, this is gonna happen to you. You decide.
And
Kind
that
of,
list is always longer, isn't it?
yeah. And that says something about us. And that's why I think that this passage or this portion has a lot to do with integrity, because it has to deal with who we are as people and how we treat our fellow man. We're constantly talking about these parsha points of when God is speaking to Moses here and he's giving it didn't all just happen when he went up onto Mount Sinai and gave him the 10 commandments. This happens over the stretch of that long time that they're in the desert for 40 years, and stuff is playing out, right? I
Yeah.
always think about some of the times when Moses is giving instructions on relationships between people. He'll say, and you don't marry, your wife's sister, and you don't do, and that's all reminiscent going back to what happened with the patriarchs. And so God is saying, okay, listen, this is how it went down back there, and all of this drama kind of happened as a result of it. We're gonna kind of nip that in the bud, and I'm gonna like make some regulations so that doesn't happen again. So during this time, when God is speaking to Moses on Sinai, and now he's talking about the land and about how you're going to go about, it's like commerce, and it's how we're going to sell things, how we're going to buy, how we're going to treat the people that are working for us, all of these different kind of dynamics that happen in relationships. It's really about how are you treating the person next to you. So we're always talking about the parsha portions being about our relationship with God, but also our relationship with our neighbor. And that's what it's kind of highlighting here, you know?
Yeah. If I could just give a personal example of this that happened to me just this week. I am an office manager for a small buy here, pay here operation who also does financing for used cars. And so one of the things that we do is we set up payments to come off of people's debit cards automatically. So we have a lot of information, we have lots of rules to follow, et cetera. So we just switched processors. And this new processor, we've been using them for almost a year. Well, last June, we had a glitch in the system and something didn't work right. And I was like, well, that's weird, but it was just kind of a one off. Well, then that was in June. In August, I started having duplicate deposits for all the credit cards. So, like, I'm getting double the money that I'm supposed to have.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, okay, this is definitely not right. And I start looking through and trying to figure out what happened. And I'm looking at their information and looking at my information and figuring out, okay, what happened here? And so I was able to see, okay, this distinction on this report tells me on your side that this is what happened. And I can see it. I could tell you exactly what the difference is just by this one little number. So do you think that's it? And they're like, no, I don't know what you're seeing. They kept telling me, no. Well, so every month when I would reconcile the bank statement, I would email them and I would say, listen, now we're up to this. Now we're up to this. Now we're up to this. We got up to $74,000 that they had over deposited into our account on duplicates. And I had a meeting with them just this week. And it was funny because I was like, why are they meeting with me? They could just tell me they got it fixed or whatever, because we know we've been conversing back and forth. And they said, we wanted to meet with you and tell you what the problem was, which was exactly what you told us it was. And we wanted to thank you. We appreciate your business and all the people that we have that we process for. You're the only one who contacted us. And I was like,
Mm.
what? How is that possible? Why would other people not? Then that goes back to that integrity as well as how you're going to treat people. I wouldn't want
Yeah.
to be in that place where I'm giving somebody extra money and they're just taking it. Oh yeah, great, give it to me, give it to me. Whoa.
And
So
it's interesting because in that instance, most of the people that are having to use that service are having to use it because they're probably in a tighter situation. They're probably not great place financially, and they're trying to make ends meet, and they're trying to And then to have that kind of dumped on them, a lot of people live, they'll say like 1 or 2 paychecks away from being homeless. Like it can be
Yes.
really hand to mouth. And to have that happen and nobody say anything, it's like, you know,
Yeah, it's insane. So it just blew my mind that I was like, nobody said anything. How could nobody say something about that? How is that okay? In my brain, it just doesn't compute because that's not how I operate, because I
right,
answer to Jehovah first and
right.
foremost.
Amen.
But oh my goodness, it was just a wild thing where I was like, I was thankful in that instance that I had the foundation and the solid foundation of who he created me to be and what he
Amen.
asks me to do. And I was very
Amen.
thankful for that. Not to brag on me. It's him.
No, but I think it's an important, so exactly what you're saying right now. When we look at these passages, and this, in particular this portion, you could almost kind of say, well, I don't live in Israel. We don't even know when the Jubilee is. We don't know this. I don't have these kind of stipulations because I'm not in that situation, right? We've talked about in other portions where we're like, okay, well, some people say, oh, it's 613 commandments. That's so much. It's like bogs me down. And you're like, yeah, but like more than half of them have to do with the temple. The temple's not here, so don't worry about it. It's not you. Some of them have to do with a woman during her menstrual cycle. If you're a man, you don't have to worry about, like, so it's like, and it kind of, you whittle it down to, it's like a more manageable number of things that God is telling me that we have to do. So in a portion like this, where it's talking about things that we can't regulate, the important part that we can take away from this is, what is the principle that God is teaching here that I can apply to my life? And that's exactly what you did. It's
Yeah.
not getting bogged down with, are we in the Jubilee year? Are we not? All this other kind of stuff that we can't figure out. But I can figure out how I'm supposed to treat other people and how I want to be treated, you know?
Yes.
And
Yes.
so your example is exactly on point, because it's like, okay, this is my environment. This is what I'm living in. This is my circumstance. How do I apply God's word? And how do I make it so that others see that I'm different without being preachy and without being like, kind of being heavy handed or anything?
Right.
Just walk is enough.
Yes. Oh, yes, that's so good. So good. Oh my goodness. There was so much in the bigger picture of everything that this portion had that I was overwhelmed, honestly, with kind of like you. I was like, I'm so glad that, like we were talking earlier, to have those different perspectives to be able to go, oh, I've got the big picture, let's and we can also dig into these little pieces. It's so helpful. And it again goes back to those perspectives, right?
This is a sneaky little portion. It's got a lot.
Yeah, no
It seems like
kidding.
it doesn't, but it has a lot.
It really does. Um, one of the interesting things also that I found in this was in chapter 27, and it's talking about um, making vows and the valuation of a person. And I was like, well, that's really interesting because who gives that valuation is the priest,
Okay.
right? There is a valuation. Let's talk about that first. There is a set valuation. And in that set valuation, what's interesting is a female adult is 30 shekels,
Yes.
but a
Okay.
male adult is 50 shekels. So the price
So
of
what?
Yeshua was 30. Why?
You're coming up with these really good questions.
Because I'm just like, why? Why is it 30? What's the significance? And for me, in my situation, and I think you can relate to this, it's speaking to it's him speaking to me as a woman who and saying, I'm just like you. Man wants to dominate, and I'm talking about, okay, let me back that up. Man's not the best word. Males want to dominate. A lot of males, not all. I'm not including everybody. Males want to dominate, and women tend to fall under that in some ways it's a burden. And so for me, it was kind of like him saying, "Look, I see you." And
Mm.
not that he had that choice, but does tell us in the word. It does tell us in the word. So, what did you see? I noticed you were gonna.
So what I was studying, what came up was the fact that um the valuation was based on the work that you could do.
Mm, yes.
So in essence, a man, because of his attributes as a man, is
Mhm.
going to be stronger and is going to have harder jobs and everything. He was placed with a larger valuation, and then a woman was placed with less. Um, but for me, the idea is that when God calls us, we have a value to Him.
Yes.
We have a value to Him. Man can come up with his determination, and again, it goes back to this is really a portion that's talking about how we treat each other and how we see each other, how we take advantage or not, you know. And so there was a standard that was set, and that's fine in and of itself, you know. But the truth of the matter is that God is saying, I see you, and I want you to see your neighbor as I see you and as I see them. So it kind of trumps. There's a system because there's a system that they lived in at that time. You know what I mean? Like, and they had it's even difficult sometimes, you know, you're reading these passages and it's hard to how do you say that word? Like hard to read certain passages of like it's talking about slavery and how you're going to have the valuation for a male slave for a, you know, for this and that or all these kind of things, and you're like, well, wait a minute, you know. But the truth of the matter is that that was the experience globally at that time. It wasn't something that was just Israel or just, you know, it was a fact of life because man has taken over and has kind of done things his own way. And so God, we were talking last portion with Charlie. I was saying, you know, God works with what He has at the time. So God sees what man says, and man does, and man decides, and man thinks he's in control, and he does blah blah blah. And he's like, all right, fine, that's the way you do it. Then this is how we're gonna work it out, and blah blah blah. But at the core of it, what he's saying is, that's all well and good, but just know the land is mine. Just know the people are mine. Just know that. And so when you look at them the way I see them. Use my eyes, don't use yours. Because if you use yours, your pride and your greed are going to get in the way,
Yes.
and there's going to be a problem.
Yes, that's so good. Ugh, I had when I was, back in my church days, the pastor that I had, he always said, when you look at somebody, you need to see them with a 10 on their head. Always. They're always a 10. And I've tried to hold on to that. And sometimes we forget and we
Oh,
judge and because we're fallible humans. So it happens. But the difference is in the heart. Do you go back and fix that?
mm-hmm,
You go
mm-hmm.
go, you know what? Oh, yuck, that was kind of an ugly thing in me. Let's not do that. Let's try not to do that again.
And that's a constant thing that we have to do. That's a constant
Constant.
thing.
Oh my
Because we'll talk
word.
really nice in here, and 5 minutes after this is over, we'll get in our car and somebody does something dumb on the road, and you're like, "Rah!" You turn into this different beast.
I would
And you're like,
never.
oh, excuse me.
I would never.
You know, so that's a constant. It's a constant, you know. We have to recognize that it's a constant.
It is.
One of the things that really came up for me as I was studying was the fact that when God is talking about these things, it's because He already knows what's going to happen. Nothing catches Him by surprise. So it's like when you have a small child and the child is learning to walk and learning to talk, and all of a sudden they're starting to explore, and you're trying to rein them in, right? They're kind of, and they're touching this and they're touching that. And now you go to the store and you'll find a whole section where you can buy things that are like covers to cover the knobs on the stove, and things to latch the door so that they can't get in, and gates and this, because we have to kind of deal with this new little person who has their own mind, who's kind of trying to discover everything around them, right? And so, and it's this constant, like, and you try to be nice, you're like, no honey, don't touch that, no honey, don't touch that, no honey, and it's, and for me it feels like this passage is a little bit of God saying, no honey, don't do that, no honey, this is the way we're going to do this, no honey. And it's like, because if you don't, I'm gonna have to break out the whip and you're not gonna like it. I'm gonna have to get the switch and you're not gonna like it. I'm just trying to help you. I remember when my son was small and he would do things that he wasn't supposed to do and everything. And he was like 2 or 3 years old. And I would talk to him and I was like, listen, if you continue down this road, literally, I was like, if you continue down this road, the consequences are going to be very, very bad for you. You have a choice. What consequence do you want? A good consequence or a bad consequence? And he's like 2 or 3, and I don't, whatever. But he kind of understood it. I'm like, do you want to change your decision? Do you want to change your choice? I would tell him, do you want to change your choice? Because if not, it's not going to go well for you. And it feels like this passage is God saying it's not going to go well for you if you don't listen. And he knew from the beginning that they weren't going to listen. And he knew that several hundred years later, you and I were going to be sitting here talking about this, and that we weren't going to listen. We don't always listen. And he tries so hard to tell us the way that we need to walk. And we can be so hard-headed sometimes. I was reading something, and it was, I don't know if you know this, but in the book of Amos, it talks about, Amos makes, let me see if I can find it. Let me see if I can find it. In the book of Amos, chapter 8. Let me see if I can get it here really quickly. In the book of Amos, chapter 8, it says in verse 4, hear this, and I'm reading from the Tree of Life version as well. It says, hear this, you who trample the poor, destroying the afflicted of the land, saying, when will the new moon be over so that we may sell again, or Shabbat so that we may open the wheat market? Let's reduce the ephah measure and increase the shekel, cheat with deceitful balances, buy the poor for silver, the needy for a pair of sandals. Okay, so here we have this prophet speaking years later. They've already established themselves, and Israel is a thing now. It's not just an idea, it's a thing, it's a country, it has, whatever. And there's a prophet that's coming and saying, listen, obviously you didn't get the memo way back when, you didn't get the message when he was talking. And what they would do is that they would and it has to do with this passage about the Shemitah and the year jubilee and all this kind of stuff. They would actually, because during this time you couldn't, so it was like you had to let the land fallow, right? And then you would have to wait, and then you'd have to sow. And if you're reading all of this, if you read this during this week and you're like, how are we supposed to survive? It's literally adds up to like 3 years where you have to wait for a new harvest that you can actually use, and kind of, and you're like, how do we, and God stipulates here, he's really good, because he knows that that's going to be the first question that we're going to ask. So he tells you, no, this and this and this is going to happen, right? But during that time, men would actually made up a rule and said, well, we can't, because it says that the produce is for like the herd, it's for the animals during this time. And basically what it did was it allowed the poor to be able to openly go and reap as well, because you couldn't do anything with it. It was going to rot there if you didn't use it. So it basically opened up the way so that everybody had an opportunity to eat and to gather and to have, whatever. And so what they did was they would say, oh, well, the animals are eating the fruit that we shouldn't be harvesting and all this kind of stuff. So we shouldn't even eat those animals. So they would actually separate a group of animals and they would feed it produce that wasn't from that time period. So then they would sell the animals at a premium because nobody wanted to infringe on this law of not harvesting and not whatever. And so they would take advantage. And this is what I mean when I'm like, man will find a way to scheme and to get the most that they can. And so in this verse in Amos, he's like, when will the new moon be over so that we may sell grain? Like they're like literally like counting the minutes where it's gonna be over so that they can get back. And they're not taking in the joy of what God is providing and what God is saying. And the joy that's found there is being able to be a blessing to others.
Yes.
It's a moment when you have to stop working and stop trying to produce and stop trying to make money and stop trying to gain and stop trying to fill your storehouses and let it rest and just be a blessing to other people. That's what I see in this passage.
Yeah.
And what I see in the book of Amos is they're saying, oh, when is this going to be over? Does that happen to you ever in Shabbat where you're kind of like,
maybe once or
it's going to
twice.
be over so I can relax? Can I tell you, sometimes Shabbat is a struggle for me because as a small business owner, it seems like I get the best ideas on Shabbat when I can do absolutely nothing about them. You know? And so, and I have to, sacrifice like that time, like, and say, it's a sacrifice for me. I have to come and I have to be conscious and say, Lord, this is what I want to do, but I'm laying it down so that I can honor you. So during this time, when these people are in this mode of working and gaining and bringing in and all this, it's saying, Lord, I'm stopping and I'm honoring you. And then the way that I can honor you is to open the door for others so that they can have enough. The whole point is that the land of Israel is supposed to provide enough for everybody. It's the land of milk and honey. It's the land of provision. It's what God has given as a gift to his people. And yet you still have people that are struggling and are on hard times, don't have enough. In the portion it says, and listen, if you have a brother that has, had struggles and they're losing out and they're losing their house, they're losing their business, they're falling on hard times, you lift them up. This portion, this commandment that God is giving is about lifting up others. It's about not gaining for myself. It's about opening the door for everybody to have enough. And yet here in Amos, we find that they didn't get that, It was constantly like, I remember there was a time when I was in Morocco and I was visiting a family in Morocco, and it was during the time of Ramadan. Now, I didn't plan to be there in Ramadan, but since I don't celebrate or do any of that, I didn't realize that I would be there during Ramadan. And so during Ramadan, they don't eat. If you're familiar with the Muslim religion, they don't eat. They from sun up to sundown, they don't eat. And I remember one of the young women that I was with, she was pregnant at the time. And so they would prepare the meal, but then you'd have to wait for the gentleman that stands in that tower that kind of prays, that the loudspeaker that you'll hear him and stuff like, I don't even know what he's called, but that man. And he would have to wait for him to pray so that it would kind of signal this is the end, people can eat. Like the day is over and you can eat. And she literally was at the table and she was sitting there with a glass of orange juice in her hand, just staring at it for like 15, 20 minutes, like just waiting for it to be over so that she could drink it. And as soon as he did what he was going to say, she downed it. Now, granted, she was pregnant, I'm not even going to go there. But the whole issue was her mind was on, when is this over? Like, oh my gosh, hurry up. Can you please just, so that I can drink the juice. And it's like the idea that I'm getting from this is that in the book of Amos, we get a glimpse of after God has established this portion and this teaching and this kind of instruction, years later, they didn't get it. And they're sitting there with their clocks like, when is it over so I can go back to doing what I was doing? This is such a waste of time.
Right.
And so it's taking a look at these little nuggets that you find in the word that you can connect. And all it does is it becomes a mirror of ourselves, of how do we do that in our own lives. Like I stated in the beginning, how do we go from, I don't know when the Jubilee is, I don't know, but what principle is God telling me that I can implement in my life so that I can implement it and be a blessing to others? right?
Right. Right. Okay. So let me contrast the story that you talked about in Amos with the story in Jeremiah. Jeremiah, the half Torah portion is in
Okay.
Jeremiah, right? So he's in jail. Jeremiah is in jail, and his cousin comes to him and wants him to be his kinsman redeemer for this land that
Yes.
he has, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And so he wants him to be this redeemer of this land. First off, he's in jail. Plus, he's a prophet and he knows what's about to happen, but he does it anyway.
Mm-hmm. And he does it because God tells him to.
Yes. He
Yes.
listened. He followed the word and he did what was right in the
Yes.
sight of the Lord. And Jehovah caused him to walk upright.
Amen. It's so interesting, right? Because you get insights into the fact that the prison system was not like what we have.
Right.
It's
Not
very
nearly.
different, and if you want to go dig into that, it's super interesting, and attach to that the life of Paul when he was a prisoner, and go find out a little bit more about that. It's super super interesting because it's not like what we have or what has been instituted in modern times, but the idea is that you would think like, what's the point?
Yeah.
Jeremiah knowing what God has been pressing. And I can imagine the impression that must have been on a prophet's heart for him to be like, my insides are burning if I don't say this.
Yeah.
I cannot move past it. I cannot do anything until I say this. Having this in your heart, and then somebody coming up and saying, hey, can you redeem my property? Because, and you're like, dude, are you even paying attention to what's going on around? Like, who cares about,
Do you
And
know what's
then
going to
yet,
happen in 70 years?
and then God's still voice coming to him and saying, no, go do it. Because again, God knows the beginning from the end. And it's a lesson, and it's a lesson of hope.
Right.
It's a lesson of God redeeming.
Because faith is also an action. It's not this
100%.
ethereal, just woo woo feeling, whatever. It's an action.
100%. 100%.
And we have to be willing to act.
Yes.
And we have to be willing to treat others kindly and
Yes.
walk in integrity and do the things that he's asking us to do. You need to do the thing he's asked you to do. I need to do the thing he's asked me to do. Maybe he's asking you to be a Jeremiah.
Yeah.
Maybe, who knows? I don't know. But I do know that if I'm attempting to walk uprightly and to walk in his word and to do his will and to follow his ways, that it can only go well.
So can I tell you something? I heard this story this week that impacted me so much, and it goes along so well with what you're saying, because it really comes down to, okay, great, we have this word that's God saying, but we can't relate to it like literally. So how can I apply it? Right. So that's what you're saying. Like, okay,
Yes.
God is going to tell you maybe to do something. It's not for anybody else, it's for you to do, but that puts into place other actions and other instances that are going to have repercussions on other people, and it kind of just grows like that, right?
Yes.
So there was a story of this man, and he said he was struggling because I think he was fishing. Let's just say he was fishing. I don't remember what it was, but it works for the story. So he was fishing, and he was on the side of a road, like when they have like these little bridges and you can just kind of fish on the side and people are driving by. And that a gentleman stopped and he said, can I say something to you? And he said something, and it wasn't a very nice thing. It was critical, and let's just say it wasn't a nice thing. And the gentleman said, I've really been working on not doing things in my own way, but kind of trying to look at things from another perspective, and to try to see the bigger picture. So instead of getting angry at what he said, I started a conversation, and I started to educate this person on certain things. And so they started talking or whatever. And I don't know how they even exchanged numbers or something. And he was like, I don't even know why, because it's not like I wanted to have a relationship with this person, but whatever. And so he says, I went out later that evening, and I went to go get myself something to eat. It was late at night. I was hungry. So he went to like a diner or something. And he said, and the gentleman that had called him, that had said those those not nice things to him, called him and said, listen, can I talk to you? And he's like, and inside he was like, but he's like, all right, fine, yes, and they started having a conversation. He's like, I'm at such and such a place getting something to eat. And so the gentleman comes and he sits down. And for whatever reason, this gentleman starts opening up his heart and telling him his life story and the things that he had done wrong and the things that had not gone right, and all this kind of stuff. And all of a sudden he starts to tell him that his wife had gotten ill and had passed away when they were younger. And so he had given up his daughter in adoption because he felt like he could not give her the life that he needed. By himself, he wasn't able to, so he gave her up. He said, but I never gave her up because I didn't want her, because she wasn't worth, something to me. It was because I was trying to do the best thing for her. But man, I wish that I had the opportunity to just tell her. If I ever had the opportunity, I would tell her that I didn't give her up just to give her up, that I was trying to do the right thing. And he says, and then all of a sudden a group of people walked in, because that daughter lived like across the country, and it had been years since that had happened. And all of a sudden a group of people walked into this place and they sat down right next to them. And it happened to be the daughter who had met a gentleman who lived in that town, and they had come, who had originally been from that town, and they had come back to the town to get married that weekend. And so they had come in to get something to eat. And he recognized her. And so he said, what do I do? And he said, tell her what you just told me. And so he turned and he says, listen, you may not know who I am. And he starts to talk and she goes, I know exactly who you are. And he was able to tell, and there was a reunion that took place, all from somebody taking the time to listen to that voice. And instead of getting angry or trying to justify because what the person had done wasn't nice, removing them from that and being able to see what God wanted to do.
Yes.
And that's exactly what we're talking about in this passage. Is God is setting up the scenario to say, listen, this is going to happen. You're going to do this for the land because it's what's best for the land. And the land is going to be able to produce bountifully for you if you listen. My blessing is going to be on this if you listen. And you're going to do this, you're going to do this. But when you mess up, if you don't, there's going to be consequences. But if you listen to that voice, if you listen to that still little voice that's telling you everybody else may not be, letting their land fallow, but leaving their land fallow, but you're going to, and I'm going to provide for you for all that time that you don't, and I'm going to bring abundance. And it goes on to say, and you're going to have to actually get rid of your old, because they would have like in this process, which don't even get me started because I really don't, I get confused because you have these different times of year that are happening. Yes. But it basically was, they would have the old grain and then the new grain, and God's basically saying you're gonna have to get rid of the old grain because the new grain is going to be so bountiful, it's going to come upon you, you're not even going to have a place to store it. There's going to be an abundance if you listen to my instruction, if you listen to my word. And so that to me is like, that's what I can take away. That's what I can take away today and say, yes. I don't know the counting, don't ask me, I don't know anything, but I can know how to treat my neighbor, and I can know how to treat those who have less than I do. I think that God gives abundance because we're supposed to be his hands and feet here on the earth.
Yes.
And we forget that. There's nothing wrong with having an abundance, but we have to learn that we can never outgive God. If God gives, it's because we have to have our hands open to be able to freely give others, Yes. And we have this, oh no, I gotta hold on to it because if not, we mess up.
Oh man. And it's so easy to fall into that simply because of the world that we live in. It's what we're surrounded by, the majority of people, but that's why we are called to be set apart.
Yes.
To be different, to be the ones who stand out for whatever reason, whatever occasion, whether it's meeting somebody in a restaurant that you really don't want to be with or something else, who knows? I have a friend that washes dishes. I love her. I wish she'd come to my house more. But that's her thing. That's what she loves to do. It's like therapy for her. So great. I'm glad that's your calling because it's not mine.
But when we come together, when the body comes together, those hands and feet and those nose and eyes and ears and all start to work in conjunction with each other, God's glory can manifest.
Yes. And when we're walking in the envious place of, well, they get to, or they had the opportunity to. How come I? Why don't you let me? When does my time come? When we start operating in those places, it's where parts of this cursing comes in. That's one of the things that Gail talked about in her can't remember if it was the Parsha point or I think it was maybe the Haftarah, but she talked about the difference of blessing and cursing, and she said if we can look at it outside of this spiritual context, and the example she gave was Dudley Do Right. When Dudley Do Right would go and rescue Nellie from the train tracks, and when she was bound, that was a curse. When he released her, that was a blessing. And I thought, yes, yes, I can see the difference of when we get into this spiritual place of looking at these blessings and curses as a punishment instead of a release or a binding. When we start looking at it
100%.
as punishment and reward, that's not his heart. That's not what it's about. That's not what we do to our children. That's not how we
Right.
treat them. We don't
So
we
true.
don't go to them with, I'm going to punish. Now, some people do. Not the best way to go about it, but we don't come to our children with, you're not going to do this or this. It's not like that. It's like you were saying. It was like you were saying with your son, where you're like, you got a choice here. Do you want this or do you want this? I mean, it's up to you. And that's what he's done with
Definitely.
us, right?
Definitely. I was just saying in our Bible study, my congregation's Bible study on Wednesday, how I have a hard time with the translation of Torah being the law. They
Yes.
always use the word law. That has a connotation with it, like a negative connotation where people immediately are predisposed to be like, I don't want that. When if you say no, it's instruction. It's I'm telling you how to do things so that you can get the best possible outcome.
Right.
That has a totally different spin on it. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Let me run and go do this then because I want to do my best, you know. But
Right.
when you look at it as these the binding the curses and the blessings and all, the words that we use have these connotations. If we can just expand our minds a little bit more to see it as, if we have to come from to it with the premise that God loves us
Right.
and that he wants the best for us, and that
Yes.
he's looking to bless us. He's looking to make our lives better. And to, if we have that mindset, oh, then it's a piece of cake. It's not hard. But if
Because
you
his
lose
plan's
sight of
always
that,
redemption. Always redemption.
absolutely. But if you lose sight of that, then it becomes a problem. You know?
Yes. Yes. I went and saw Marty Solomon came to San Antonio, and it was it was really cool. And it was in this tiny little church that was not messianic, not anything like that. And he came and he spoke, and the way that he just talked about kind of what you're saying about opening our mind and being more open to um, be able to sit at the table with somebody else, someone who doesn't think like us, who doesn't believe like I do, or who doesn't see the scripture in the same way that I do. And being able to still sit at the table with them without judging them and without saying, without giving them the, oh, you're wrong, you need to listen to me, kind of a thing, which a lot of people who are trying to be Torah pursuant can do in a heartbeat really easily. And I know that I have struggled with that in the past. And listening to him talk about that and just having that openness and being able to sit at the same table with the Presbyterian or the Lutheran or the Pentecostal or whoever it is, and
And
be able
bite
to
your
say,
tongue.
yes, and be able to go, oh, how do you see that? Really? Okay. Well, that's interesting. And let it be that, without being like, oh, you're so wrong, you just don't get it, do you? you know
You have strayed.
It's all over because you got to be under the law. Sorry, had to use the
Mhm.
word.
But
But
totally.
right. And it's that understanding that the way that I view the instructions are not the way that everybody else views the instructions. We can have lots of similarities, but we can also have differences. And I will tell you, Jesus brought me to Yeshua. It was my
100%.
relationship with Jesus that changed my heart so completely, that gave me that desire to follow after his word and to seek him and to seek his ways and his face. That is what brought me to Yeshua and understanding that he is eternal. Jehovah is eternal and that he doesn't change.
Amen. Amen.
And that was a big deal. And I love the way that Charlie describes it when she says, we're not going to talk about our ex. So when we're talking about the church and we're criticizing all of those things, and you can't say Jesus and doing these things, we're criticizing our ex. We all came from somewhere. Now I know
We lost, yeah,
there are
the
a
whole
few
point.
people who have walked it their whole life. They're a lot younger than I am for sure. But for the most part, we all came from somewhere, whether it was complete unbelief or it was a place in the church that led us to the place we're in now.
Yes,
And so we have to
absolutely.
honor that to honor him.
100%. 100%. There's a song, the Crab Family, and they have a song, and it talks about two women talking, and it says how one like grew up in the church and like Jesus was all she ever knew, and then this other person who had had a really hard life and everything, but at the end of the day they both got to stand before the Father. So it's like it doesn't matter where you start off, you're no better, you're no worse. The fact of the matter is that at the end we both are going to stand before the Father, and his
Yes.
love is enough for both, you know.
Yes. Yes. I heard another person describe it like if you look at a triangle, and let's say that on one corner of this triangle over here is Christianity, and on extreme Christianity, okay? On this other side of the triangle is Judaism. There's a lot of space in between there. There's a whole spectrum of the way
Oh,
that somebody could view the word, right? And take in the instruction and attempt to act it out. So who are we to say they're doing it wrong? Because like you said, his love is big enough and is above all of that.
it's like when you think of, there's this the famous verse that everybody, or the concept that everybody always talks about when they talk about David, and they say, it's hard to reconcile that he was a man after God's own heart. You talk about that concept, and you're like, wait, but he did this, wait, huh? And I think the fact of the matter is that he never let go of recognizing that God was there, and that when he messed up, instead of turning away, he would turn to him and face the consequences, face the punishment, face whatever it was. But there was always this knowledge of God being there and God's sovereignty covering whoever I am.
Yes.
Did not remove the consequences of his actions or anything, but it's that same concept of we're all coming from someplace. We're all coming with baggage, and we're all coming with these ideas. How can I learn to take this word that I'm reading, that maybe on the surface it looks like I have no connection, but there's something in there that I can take, that I can apply, that is going to help open up the door for God's blessings to come into my life?
Yes.
That I think is the key, and to continue walking. It's like what we were talking about at the beginning. All of this knowledge and all this stuff that Moses is talking about, God didn't just give it to him in 2 seconds. It was over the course of many, many years of walking in a very dry and desolate and not comfortable place, where God was speaking to Moses to provide instruction for his people. And that's a lot like our lives. Our lives are, we have these dry places sometimes, and we have these wonderful hills and these wonderful triumphs, and but we're going through life, and God is giving instructions so that we can manage both those high places, but those low places as well.
Yes.
And so when things are going well, we can do things well. And when things are not going well, we can still do things well because God is over all of it and he has not left us and he has not lost control. You know,
Because he
sometimes you hear
never
those
leaves us,
prayers of,
forsakes us, right?
those prayers like, God, please take control. It's like, when did he never have control? If God were to lose control of what is going on, we would all be lost.
It would definitely spin out of control.
Right? But
Yes.
God is in control. And so let's take these wonderful nuggets that we're learning and that we're taking from these passages and saying, okay, what can I apply out of all of this? What can I apply to my life? What can I take away from there and implement so that my ways can be, full of abundance and full of God's goodness.
Right. We have to be willing to allow him into those places in our heart where they're cracked and dry and needing some relief,
Yeah, yeah,
even though we may not
absolutely.
recognize it as that's what it is.
Right, right.
Right. We don't recognize that I've damaged my heart because I've done whatever it is against his ways. And so he wants to come in and bring that water and bring that refreshing and heal those places. And sometimes there's consequences that go along with it, just like David faced.
Yeah, yeah. And even in that, he gives you the fortitude to be able to walk through it
Yes.
and come out the other side, which is
Yes.
how amazing and how loving is God to do that. That even when we deserve it, we can walk through it and there's still a blessing in that. There's still something that he can redeem in that. Amen.
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 This is a bit
This is
much,
a sneaky portion.
right?
We were concerned that it was short and that we weren't going to have anything to talk about, but he is faithful.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is.
He is faithful.
How about if I say a prayer and
Absolutely.
we'll
Amen.
head into an
Yes,
after party, and I have thoroughly enjoyed this today.
I have as well.
So,
Thank
all
you,
right,
ladies, for being with us.
we appreciate you so much.
Yes.
Father, you're so good. You're just so good, and I'm so grateful for you, for your presence, for your wisdom, for your guidance, for allowing us to break the bread of your word together today. And I ask that as we go forward through our week and as we are entering into Shabbat, that you would just speak to the places in our heart that need your word, that need that salve and need that water, that need the healing that only you can speak into, because you're good, because you're about redeeming us. And I just thank you for it. In the name of Yeshua, amen.
Amen.
Amen.